So here we sit doing a third recording in as many weeks. You know, when we do these space heater chats, they tend to be, or the intention behind them is to be even more free flowing than the regular roundtable episodes. And in many respects, time has proven, or time has said, they were meant to be chats between regulars and former regulars, kind of in a more relaxed mood without the format of the regular roundtable. But as James and I have done them, and then as Mohammed started doing it last time with us, or with me, they've proven that they can also be a replacement for what we used to do or with the digests. We can just hone in on one thing and talk about that ad nauseum for the entire recording. This podcast is called the Anime Roundtable. And it tends to, the whole idea is to talk anime, but we put, anime and manga interchangeably. But by my own admission, I tend to overlook the manga side. And I was so into it back then. By my own admission, over the past couple of years, haven't always kept up with it nearly as much. But I know Kevin is way more into it at this point than I would be. And I have a great respect for it. And we haven't really had a more hardcore manga conversation in some time. And with Comic-Con passing a couple weeks ago, we hinted last week that there was an industry roundtable presented during the Comic-Con at Home show, and we talk at length about it. So that's what we're going to do tonight. And so Kevin is here. We're going to talk about it, as I said. And Mohammed decided to join us. So Mohammed's doing his second go around the space heater. Kevin's doing the space heater for the first time.
Hello.
And we're going to we'll almost get right to it. I know we're taping this as Otakon is going, as Crunchyroll Expo, or what do we call it? What's the term?
The virtual Crunchyroll Expo or something.
Virtual Crunchyroll Expo is going. I know there are headlines coming out of that. We'll hint at a few of them. We'll talk about a couple of them if they're manga related. Anything else? I know James and Jeff will get in on that when we do episode. What's the number? I've lost count. 48? Or is it 49?
I think we're 49. At 50, right? No?
We're close to 50. But when we do episode 49, either next week or the week after. But I want to hone in on the manga industry roundtable. And first of all, I had a late night last night, staying up to watch that and make notes, because stuff really did get my attention watching that. I know Kevin has watched it a couple times. I know Mo has watched it at least 3 times.
It was very entertaining. I enjoyed it.
Well, let's hone in.
I mean, it's been a while since I've seen like an industry panel, but I will say that the professionalism of it was really nice. Like, they all were very business-like, I guess. Just very nice.
Yeah, it was it's knowledgeable. Clearly the experience of everybody who did the panel, whether it's Deb Aoki as the moderator or the representatives from each of the companies, Mark DeVera from Yen Press.
Mark crushed it.
Yeah. Mark Hamrick from Viz, Ed Chavez speaking on behalf of Denpa, Layla Acker, generally speaking, Penguin Random House, but
Square Enix.
More Square Enix.
Square Enix, yeah.
Yeah. and Ivan Salazar for Kodansha USA.
Yep.
They showed their knowledge.
Yep.
Clearly, they know a few things, and they'll let you know a few things. They'll let you know, but they'll let you know you don't know as much as you think you know as a fan.
No, absolutely, and I like the variety of companies that were on this panel. Right, you had Ed, all the way to like Kevin with Biz and so forth. Just like the barometer of
Sure, you get the Deb used the term 800-pound gorilla
exactly.
when referring to Viz, and more specifically Shonen Jump. We'll get to that in a bit later.
Yep.
But then, then you get Denpa and Ed Chavez being really the. Is minnow a fair word to describe how
Nah, man,
Denpa?
he's the unsung hero. He's that dude who produces local artistry based quality stuff that you know is going to be good, man.
Well,
He's your local baker versus like the Walmart bread, right?
well,
The Wonder Bread. Okay, that's a good
with
that's a good
Ed,
metaphor.
because I've gotten to know Ed throughout the years when he was back with Vertical, rest in peace. Uh, he's usually had how do I put this? I think Layla had put this how he does have like an artistic sensibility to most of the things he puts out. I know he does try and get things that he likes as well if he feels like it's worth the risk and has a good chance for success. I know, for example, when they put out Mobile Suit Gundam: The Origin, uh, he he even admitted that if Gundam: The Origin didn't do well, that would have costed him his job. And fortunately, it did amazingly well for Vertical. The Gundam fans came through on that release, and it is a fantastic work. I would argue that it's the definitive way to experience the original Mobile Suit Gundam trilogy. Don't at me.
No, okay,
The movies are right. The movies are right.
The movie, like for the anime, I would say watch the movies.
okay,
For the original trilogy, that is.
all right. So, okay, where do you want to really start with this?
I mean, could we? I mean, at the beginning, right? The
Do we
incredible.
do we want to go in order with all the questions and thoughts from all of this?
I mean, maybe not everything, but at least let's start with like the because I guess I might have overlooked the incredible year that Mango Records have had, but that was very nice. The increase in sales and so forth, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is the second boom.
Yeah, I mean, I liked in the middle they're talking about how it's not just the new titles that are like soaring, but like the older shit.
Yeah,
Like how, and in my mind it clicked right away. How I was like, yeah, I don't buy a lot of new manga, but like I will definitely buy like a reprint of like of a volume or something that I really enjoyed. Right? I mean,
yeah. Like I've been experiencing this firsthand for the past year because the manga publishers have been saying, just buy new stuff, please buy the new stuff. But I've just, because I know the new stuff is going to stick around for a while, I've had to uh, panic buy a lot of old stuff because it's been very hard reprinting back stock because they need to still publish the new stuff. So the printers are backed up. So they need to make hard decisions on what they feel could be reprinted from the back catalog and what just needs to languish into obscurity. And I would say, out of all the companies, uh, I would say Yen Press and Seven Seas have been affected the most by this, where numerous volumes of different titles that they've been releasing, whether or not it's completed or if it's ongoing, have been going massively out of print. So in the case of Yen Press, so like Higurashi, Umineko, Inuboko Secret Service, Barakamon, like these titles are almost entirely out of print. And these are not necessarily poor sellers. Like Inuboku SS and Barakamon, several of those earlier volumes have had several printings. Higurashi had like 7 or 8 printings for much of the first half of their release. And now it's like you can't find most of the stuff. And then you'll see certain volumes going for 50, for 80, for 200, for $300 on eBay and other secondhand marketplaces. It's pretty nuts. Seven Seas as well. Like Railgun is ongoing, but it has like probably like 12 volumes that are out of print right now. Haganai has like 4 or 5 volumes out of print right now, and that's about to be wrapping up soon at volume 20. Freezing has like a good 4, 5, 6 volumes out of print. One volume commands $400 on eBay. Like
Hey,
it's
so
nuts.
I had a question about that. Do you think all these titles being out of print or relatively financially inaccessible increases piracy of them, or what?
Hmm, it's hard to say. I It's possible. Granted, most of those titles had been scanlated for ages. Like anything that has any remote popularity probably was scanlated at one point or another. Like I would expect Railgun to have been scanlated, for example.
Hmm. Well,
Usually with these out of print volumes, it tends to kill sales of the remaining imprint volumes more often than not. Like usually it will just sell a lot slower because people will go, oh, if I can't buy this one book, then why do I bother? Or, well, I don't want to pay like $80 for this one book, so like why should I bother?
so there's that give and take, almost a vicious circle of sorts.
And even for Viz, a lot of they've been having trouble keeping their uh, they've been having trouble keeping things in stock for even ongoing stuff. Like you can't really find volumes of Jujutsu Kaisen or Chainsaw Man at times, and a lot of older titles are starting to get out of print books too. Like even stuff like D Gray Man or like Tagami Bachi or like even like Hikaru no Go. Like some of that stuff has been going out of print. Like the odd volume here and there. Uh, Although I know with the Shonen Jump stuff, they like if it's something that's relatively popular, they or has some pedigree, they will tell you that okay, no, we will eventually reprint this. So there's a lot of out of stock slam dunk volumes right now, but Viz did mention how they do intend on reprinting it at some point. Same with Eye Shield. There's a few out of print. Well, not out of print. They're out of stock technically because Viz confirmed they will eventually reprint them. I know Black Lagoon has gone out of print for a few volumes. Out of print. I always say out of print, but like various volumes of Black Lagoon have been going out of stock, and Viz does try to keep that in print because it does very well for them, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
so on and so forth.
Well, on the topic of shonen, of the shonen genre, right? I mean, there's still like there's a reason it still rules. It's the biggest segment, and for in terms of the manga medium as a whole, it's basically mainstream within that.
Yep.
I mean, it's the most accessible, right? I mean,
In that
old,
sense,
young, boy, girl,
there's
doesn't really matter.
shifting,
Yeah,
but they acknowledged the shifts.
well, absolutely. I mean, half the panel at the end was all about the increase in sales and the increase in BL sales, right?
Yeah.
BL shojo getting somewhere.
Exactly.
BL for sure. Isekai seems
Yeah.
to be
Oh,
like isekai is not a term is only I have to admit a term that I've become familiar with only in the last couple of years, but the concepts I get.
But
Yeah, the concept's been around forever. Like,
The
yeah,
concept itself, yeah.
exactly,
I,
exactly.
as I said, I never knew the term. I wasn't familiar with the term, but I've seen it for a very long time. But
Escaflowne was isekai.
sorry,
Escaflowne is isekai.
I
True.
get it.
Don
I get
Hat,
it. As I said, I just never knew the word.
12
And,
Kingdoms.
and by the way, this is how I got through school too. I never knew the exact word, but I knew the ideas. Unfortunately, I couldn't associate them on a quiz, so more often than not, I failed the tests. But that's where we are.
Yeah, that's why when Mark De Vera was saying how that was their segment of shonen, so to speak, that has done very well for them. Them and Seven Seas, they're the two companies that have been putting out the most isekai content lately.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's address the last year and how they look at the boom. This boom, you refer to it as a second boom, Kevin. They obviously it's nice. I think it was who was it? I think it was Layla.
It was.
Layla Acker used the metaphor of a sine wave.
Yep.
So it goes up, it comes down, or goes up. And in many respects, the industry as a whole seems to be bracing for not necessarily a downturn, but a leveling, a settling. I think that's what was the term they used?
A gradual decline.
The gradual decline might be overstating it.
Plateauing, maybe?
Plateau might be the better word. I'm looking for it in my own notes, but yeah.
I mean, it's. I like the analogy Layla gave about the first boom and what caused that to happen versus the second boom and what's causing this one to happen.
Yeah, this is like it's less because she reminded people about borders and their involvement in all of this. It was a case of putting all your eggs in one basket, or almost, or certainly roughly half, if not give or take. And then 2008, 2009, Borders and all associated stores, Walden Books, Dalton, gone. And with it went at least half of your outlets, your distribution outlets, your means of getting out there.
Small publisher went down with that too.
Sorry?
And then almost every small publisher at the time went under, like Gokami or Raijin.
Yeah.
And then you had different companies cancel titles, like Kodansha canceled titles like Nodame and Suzuka and School Rumble. Viz had to cancel several titles, like Strawberry 100%, which I am still sad about, as well as like Kurohime and what else? There was a couple shoujo titles that got canceled, like Body. Like, yeah, like a lot of companies were affected one way or another.
And well, and obviously now you just mentioned the effect that it had, and the way Acker put it, the only way that could happen again is if Amazon went under.
True. I mean, it's similar, I guess. I mean, it's like you hitch your entire wagon to another entity, right? So I mean, Amazon could go down. Like it probably won't, but it could, right? I mean,
well, we're in theory, of course, you leave yourself if you leave yourself open, but this is probably a safer tie in,
right? Because if Amazon were to fail, then like the entire world has a bigger problems.
Well, you'll get arguments about how cool it would be too, but
true.
You're right. So that's the only thing that could see it. So there's a boom right now, and is it COVID? And much of it's COVID driven.
True.
Much of it's pandemic driven. They expect a leveling, not necessarily a downturn, just a settling of everything. I have to find the exact term I kept hearing throughout all of that, but I mean, as Salazar said, being locked up indoors really helped, signaling of acceptance of anime and manga, and taking advantage of people rediscovering with increased accessibility through digital. We'll get to the digital parts. I know we'll get to the digital parts a bit later on, but he just referred to it as a perfect storm because not just the pandemic helped in and of itself. It's
Generations.
just that there had been a lot of other things that kind of that had happened around the industry that really were able to take advantage of everything that happened in the pandemic. Basically, pandemic being a catalyst of sorts. Like it was, but you understood how the catalyst, how it as a catalyst worked. Okay, you took issue. I think Kevin, you took issue with this thought. Shonen Jump being the 800-pound gorilla. What's up with the app? And Hamrick made a couple points. Continue the subscription model with Shonen Jump. I guess that refers to the app, and see what's been working in Japan. So basically, see how it works on digital and consider print in the process, hoping for a binging mentality and hopefully driving backlist sales. Subscription service seems to be a good low-cost entry point to sample new series and hopes to help the print side. Those were my notes.
I didn't take issue with that. That's what they've been doing this whole time with the Shonen Jump app. Sorry,
I mean, we're in this. Like we've talked about this off air. I know you may have a disagreement with one part of all of this. I think, or maybe you're just speaking as a collector.
Oh, you're talking about this. Well, this was more specifically in reference to what Ivan Salazar is his name. I forgot.
Okay, so this was more on Ivan than.
Yeah, Kevin. It's mostly with how Kodansha has been doing things lately, where they have been going much heavier into digital first / digital exclusive releases. So certain titles they will just print and digitize immediately upon release, whereas there are numerous other titles that are digital only, and these are clearly the titles that they don't have as much confidence in that they'll do well in print for whatever reason.
And digital good testing ground, although, and these are my notes again, and this was an interesting point that he brought up in terms of the digital side. Although fairly digital is a good testing ground, although fairly different even on different platforms. And he put up an example. Kindle digital sales, or I guess ebooks or e-ink devices like a Kindle, seems to be more popular in terms of downloads of things like josei and shoujo. But going with Amazon again, Comixology, the app seems to be more popular for those who like to consume shonen and seinen. I found that an interesting point because of the known consumer bases of those services. Kindles, e-ink devices, Kindles are more known to appeal to a female crowd. Women are more likely to hold a Kindle as opposed to reading off of a tablet. They're likely to have the tablet too, but if they're going to read, it's going to be on a Kindle or an e-ink device, something dedicated, an e-reader, a Kobo, whatever. But then guys, I guess, they'll go with they probably aren't likely to have such a thing, so they're more likely to do it with a everything device like a tablet, and so have the apps ready appropriately for that, like a Comixology, and hence the appeal or the why that breaks down shonen and seinen on something like Comixology. Because of that, Salazar keeps mentioning he as in Kodansha probably has to look at hitting very different formats and spreading and casting their net, I guess, to reach as many people as possible. But I thought him bringing that up was a really interesting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've
So
noticed that too. That most of Kodansha's shoujo content have been digital only because shoujo is uh, not as popular as it used to be in terms of uh, that type of content. Like if we think about the traditional, air quotes, traditional like shoujo manga, so your more romance based titles, your more so stuff like I don't know, stuff like Vampire Knight or like Honey and Clover or Mars. That stuff, there's just fewer. There are not as many titles coming out nowadays in print as before. I feel like I look at Viz's Shoujo Beat imprint. They definitely don't publish as much as they used to. Like they obviously are still putting out new stuff, but definitely not the same amount as say the mid late 2000s. Uh, I think that like with Kodansha, like yeah, there's like a few, but I know like a longer shojo title like LDK was not doing well for them, and so they had to do the omnibus release. Like they decided to put two volumes in one for those later books, and when they do that, that's when you know a series is bombing for Kodansha, because that's a common practice that they've done.
as in like what going omnibuy?
Yeah, so if a series first started out coming out one book at a time, but then they started doing like volume 19 and 20 or volume 21 and 22, that's when you know a title's not doing well for Kodansha. So LDK is one of those examples, and Yamada Kun and the Seven Witches is another example of that, where they've been doing 2-in-1 releases of that, and they've slowed down the release of that series too, so you don't get as many books coming out in a year too for that specific series because they need to stimulate the blood loss, so to speak.
So you don't see as rosy a picture for shojo, so to speak, and I guess maybe josei to that degree.
Yes, like okay, I honestly, like there haven't been as many shojo hits. I would say probably the last big shojo hit that was not a reoccurring IP is probably Yona of the Dawn by Viz, because
Mm-hmm.
like I think of really huge hits in the past for shojo, like Orin High School Host Club, like Fruits Basket, like Sailor Moon, like Vampire Knight. Like there have been sizable hits, but they're not to the level of a Fruits Basket. I would say hasn't been one of those in quite a while. Whereas you look
Hmm.
at shonen, there's consistently like really big titles.
I mean, the formula is easier to follow for shonen, right?
I think that's also just
No,
the history
it,
of the. Well,
it's
I'm
because
wondering how much of this is part of the history of of English language manga,
it's
because
because like I'll say this, it's because with shonen, like traditional male targeted shonen titles, like more often than not you'll have times where or you'll have titles where both males and females and everybody in between can enjoy that stuff. But when it comes to girl targeted or female targeted titles, you're not going to have nearly as many males consuming that content.
Yeah, it's like the He-Man stuff, right?
mm,
And then in talking about Josei, like Ed brought this point up, how Josei still tends to not do nearly as well. And Josei manga is something that I know Ed does like to put out and does try to take risks when he thinks it's worth a shot. Like I know he's put out stuff by Moyoko Ano and Kyoko Okazaki back when he was with Vertical. So yeah, it's kind of a shame. Hopefully March comes in like a line will do well. That's Chika Umino's newer work, creator of Honey and Clover.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. I mean, it still boggles me to some point. And remember, I've been using the the analogy of shonen being the mainstream within the manga medium. Safe, which I don't know if you. First of all, do you agree with that metaphor? Just so I can
Can you repeat
just
that?
continue
Can you
running with it
repeat
a
that
little bit,
metaphor?
huh?
Can you repeat that metaphor?
Shonen being the mainstream within the manga medium.
And in the anime medium too, I would say. Kind of goes without saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's kind of what reinforces the popularity of shonen manga, right? Just the fact that the shows are there, and that brings on the cycle of reading the manga, and then that these new shows and new manga, and so forth and so forth and so forth, right?
I guess part of it, and this comes back down to the like Deb brought up the idea of okay, what goes into the decision making process of what gets picked up. We're
Oh,
not
right.
kidding on how much is picked up, and just an acknowledgement. First of all, we're only seeing a little bit, the tip of the iceberg at best.
True.
So there's a couple different considerations, but I think a key line, and this was said by Acker, although she had another interesting line, which I'll get to in a few seconds, which I think ties into one of the stories we followed last week. Sometimes it's just the commitment. And then she went on to cite Hajime no Ippo, which has been run
130.
131
I
volumes.
love how she used a competitor's example
You think
because
just throwing it back in their face?
I mean,
yeah,
she used to work there,
that's because
so.
Ippo no, because Ippo's with Kodansha. That's a Kodansha
Oh, right, right,
manga.
right. I thought it was with Viz, no?
No, it's a Kodansha manga. So
Okay.
in Japan. So and it's funny because sometimes I do it check out those Kodansha events online, and every so often you'll have a few people going, "Hey, why aren't you licensing Hajime no Ippo? We want Hajime no Ippo, man!" Like, and then they're probably trolls, to be honest. But you get a few of those people coming out of the woodwork, and
Sure.
and that's the thing. More often than not, when you license a manga, you have to license all of it.
You have to commit. And
More often
we
than not.
saw what happened when you, well, we saw a version of what happened. I mean, I still stay, you said it with Strawberry 100%, although there was other circumstances. I say it with I Hate You More Than Anyone. That got canceled just one volume short of the end. CMX did, although there once again it could have been those
Oh,
circumstances
that was
back in
because
08.
of Borders. That was 100% because of Borders. Uh,
But
most of the
it's
Viz ones were Borders too, with some exceptions like Zatch Bell, and that was not because of Borders, but that's another topic altogether.
but it kind of goes like, what pisses you off more? A title never completing or a title never starting? Because
Title never completing.
right, because nobody cares about the circumstances by and large. They're understandable, but just Joe Schmo doesn't care why it happened.
Well,
The fact is, they wanted it to finish. It never finished. That looks bad. I will never buy from you again, but you may not. But who cares? You're probably not in business anymore. So, but I'm not buying you again either way. So, this is like that's part of the dilemmas, and maybe this is where this is sort of part of that selection process. It's a multi-volume commitment, but you still have to keep it a manageable commitment, especially if you're going to go outside your comfort zone, which is another question.
Yeah, like when it comes to that kind of stuff, I feel like Viz usually doesn't like to repeat failures. Like like there's certain things that you can kind of sense, I feel, and this is speculation, but when it comes to like the digital exclusive titles that were formerly in the Shonen Jump app, but they decided not to put in print. One title that's ongoing that actually has become more popular in Japan is one called Mission Yozakura Family. Uh, that one is very akin to another past Shonen Jump manga called Reborn, if anyone remembers Reborn. That one was also an action series that started off as a comedy, like a wacky ensemble cast comedy that turned serious later on. And Reborn got canceled uh, after the Borders situation happened. That was one of the victims. And despite Yozakura doing pretty well in the polls in Japan, like for whatever reason, Viz is choosing not to put that in print right now. Like they're keeping it digital exclusive right now, and I can't help but feel like they don't want another Reborn on their hands, even though uh, Yozakura Family turned into a serious action title a lot quicker than Reborn did.
Sort
Because
of a
other titles
jump the
that
shark
came
type
out
thing.
after Mission Yozakura Family, like Mashal, have already been announced that they're going to put that in print.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously we don't know the numbers, so to speak. So that's why I say that that's speculation on my part.
Still a nice way to put it.
Or you look at like how Viz really doesn't put out the really perverted romantic comedies nowadays because they didn't, ever since Strawberry 100% got canned, I can't really think of a really pervy Shonen Jump series that they've put out because you could argue that it's not on brand with how Viz wants to portray Shonen Jump because they never picked up To Love Ru, they never picked up Yuna and the Haunted Hot Springs. They finally let what was it? Shueisha finally allowed Seven Seas to pick those up. But interestingly enough, Ayakashi Triangle actually did get picked up for simul publication. Not on the app though. You have to go on Viz's website for that. And remains to be seen whether or not they'll eventually put that in print. I think it might be digital only. I don't remember that announcement if that happened or not, but yeah, that's another example where they're more hesitant on past failures. But I think with Ayakashi Triangle, once they simulpub that, it meant that they were literally simulpublishing every single new title in Weekly Shonen Jump.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I get it. So they just don't want to be, twice bitten, right?
Mm-hmm.
In many respects.
They're
So
treated carefully in some instances, yes.
yeah, it's just we're talking, but how long would those first bites have happened? How many years are we talking?
Well,
How
that
many
was
years ago?
probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago,
See,
12 years ago. But then
and
again, they've sometimes, what they deemed were not worth the risk, sometimes they do go back and go through with it after all, because let's remember this. Demon Slayer was one of those titles that they didn't think was worth the risk at first. So they didn't even put it as part of the simulpub lineup after they did the first 3 chapters of the trial run. It was only maybe a year and a half later that they did decide to put out Demon Slayer straight to book format. Like, so they weren't simulpubbing it, but they were eventually putting it out from volume 1 onwards, and then it blew up. And so then they actually, no, I think they did decide to simulpub it eventually, and then the anime came out and then exploded, and then here we are. And Act Age was another example of they didn't simulpub that at first, but they eventually did.
Mm-hmm. So, and my point is, well, we're talking 10 years ago. So other thing, obviously, so other conditions have come up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me go with this line that from Acker's thought about what the process that gets picked up, because I want to tie it in with the thought that one of the headlines from we covered last week. And this is the note as I wrote it. Publishers have different considerings and some specializations. Viz has shonen. Yen Press has isekai and light novels. Kodansha spreads out, calls them more of a waterfront. Denpa more independent and artistic. Probably going back to what we talked about with Ed Chaffis just a few minutes ago. Square Enix more on the video game tie-ins and commercial tie-ins. And they're looking at what will succeed in the market. Fans don't realize that how opaque that is. I guess there's always more to it. Japan, North American, Europe, French, English, Italian, Spanish, they all have different sensibilities, and different things will work in different places. Then certain types of material are more suitable for certain markets than not.
I mean, it basically boils down to dollar bill, y'all, right?
Well, yeah, part of it's dollar bill, y'all. But that last sentence, suitable for certain markets and not suitable for in other markets.
Yeah.
And that brings and I think you know where I'm about to go with this.
Maybe.
Take a guess?
Just go with it. I don't
Okay.
really know.
Takeshi Natsuno's words we mentioned last week, Kadokawa's president, when he put his foot in his mouth. And remember, we at worst we accused Kadokawa's PR of not of letting their message get out of control. But I said at the time last week, realistically, you have to think about that. And in many respects, that I think if Natsuno put his terms, came out with the tone that Acker in many ways had in this roundtable, I don't think he would have been dragged through the mud like he was. So that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm beginning to think here. And you know that's what Natsuno has to start to look at it, at least from his end on the Japanese side. Okay, maybe that's a tangent and all that. And maybe I'm missing something. That's why I brought it up. Is there an aspect to all of this I'm missing? Or do we just let others listen? Do we let Jeff and James listen, and maybe they'll see something I don't? Or at the very least, is this at least food for thought?
Probably some food for thought, if anything.
I mean, I'm not going to try and claim I'm right or anything like that. It's just had me thinking in those terms. Right? I mean, those might have been the words or the thoughts. What Acker just expressed might have been the thoughts that Kadokawa's president actually had. But boy, did it not come out that way. Anyway. Want to keep moving?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, let's go back to that same question. Devera's line. Can I sell it? And can I sell it on two fronts? Look for the anime tie-in. Taking a few gambles like light novels. but respect some level of risk taking. So fans have to make themselves known and step up. That was how I summarized his answer to what goes into getting picked up.
I mean, honest, his answer was the most concise, right? I mean, obviously the financials is important. Make sure that the verticals are all there to maximize profits, but not everything is just for profits. You take a shot once in a while on something that becomes a demon slayer, right?
Yeah, I mean, business is part of risk is part of business.
Exactly.
Just using the old cliche.
They've
You
been
can't always
licensing.
play it safe. You have to look to capture lightning in a bottle,
Well, that's
right?
why they're putting all those isekai titles, because uh, several of them have eventually been turned into anime,
Mm-hmm.
which will help. And then you will have just people who are dedicated isekai fans that will just eat up any type of isekai content as well.
Oh, yeah.
And
Okay.
then you
Well,
also have solo leveling, where yes, that is a bit of a risk, in that it's never been. Web comics, Korean web comics haven't really been put out yet. But then, of course, they went with a very popular title,
yeah.
so like some of that risk is hedged as well.
I'm hoping that they're doing the Marvel, Disney, every movie studio type scenario where it's like put money in something huge that has big returns and then spend the excess profits on smaller, less known titles in hopes for them to succeed, right?
Oh, that's happened with most companies. Uh,
Yeah.
I know with Viz that happens sometimes. I know, uh, yeah, I said that happens with Seven Seas as well, where you know they put out a lot of isekai and light novels and horny manga, but then the sales of those can allow them to put out like Cutie Honey or Queen Emeraldus or Captain Harlock, like from the classic line that they sometimes do. So you do see that at work every so often.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, then once again, then that kind of leads into Aoki's next question. Name a title in your list or genre that's outside your comfort zone that you hope people will take a chance on that wouldn't have been tried 5 years, some odd years ago.
Dick Fight Island.
And well, that
Oh
ended up
no, that would have
in
been
the
tried
across the board.
if it existed.
There was a consistently across the board. It was BL,
Yep.
but another answer was also classics, Fruits Basket. But and you just cited Harlock, but sometimes it's so. Let me further divide the classic answer and say
They're modern.
rediscovering of classics
They're
from the
modern
aughts.
classics.
Yeah, rediscovering classics and then going even further back, probably showing something almost for the first time, a classic. But BL was the big answer.
Well, not really BL so much as just titles about LGBTQ characters.
The want for representation, which which we have brought up on a number of occasions.
BL's been around for quite a while.
Sure, but the want is now there. So now make it known. Now look for it. Here's a shovel. Can you dig it? Maybe that's a bad way of that. Maybe I just used that lyric wrong. Yeah, and then there was some thoughts on Dick Fight Island. What the hell, man?
I mean, it's just
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
But there's this hope, and Chavez kind of like summed up that question, or at least ended his answer to that question by saying he does hope to see Josei titles kind of hit a stride of some sort.
As do I. I love Josei.
And maybe the market says It could happen because, well, remember, and this is like a key pillar and stuff. And I think when we talked about Sony, your consumers are growing, not necessarily not growing in terms of numbers, just growing up more like it.
Yep.
And then they're passing it out on.
Absolutely.
They're passing that on to their kids and grandkids.
Right.
But their tastes are maturing too. There's your hopes with the Josei and more mature titles. Maybe and then maybe their tastes get eclectic again. There's Shoujo's next chance. If you are of the argument that it's not there right now. But once again, it comes back down to, well, 10 years have passed. And things change, and a lot of things change in 10 years. Okay, let's go back. Let's continue the questions in order that they were asked. Piracy. It's there. Jeff Chavez said it's there. De Vera. Does it affect acquisitions? Nope, not really. But it gives us a good chance. Gives us a good sense of what's been popular.
That's very interesting of him to say that. Maybe times have changed now, but depending on which company you spoke to in the past, they would tell you that sometimes it does affect licensing decisions. Maybe
so you think
it doesn't affect his company specifically, his employer specifically, but it depends.
But I mean,
I think you have a contrasting answer between him and Chavez, and I think that's also just the big guy, the big publisher or the reasonably sized publisher with who De Vera works for, and then contrast that with what Chavez says because he works for a smaller publisher. Go ahead, Mo.
Well, I mean, no, I was just gonna say that, like, I mean, you hit it on the head with the whole size comparison, right? I mean, piracy hits different companies in different ways depending on the size, right? But the idea that because something will be pirated or is possibly capable of being pirated, affecting their decision to license it, I mean, I have to side with Mark on that, saying that, like, if they had to make their decisions based on piracy, they never license anything, right?
Mm-hmm. So I thought that was an interesting answer. Great answer too.
Oh yeah.
But but De Vera also adds another element to this and says, still not a good thing to do, obviously, still, especially if you're the artist.
I mean, he did mention this current generation's rise with the Patreon coffee, support the artist directly, right? I mean, I feel like in 5-10 years time, that's just going to become more commonplace, which hopefully will lead to, like, people not pirating as much, right?
Identifying with the artist, empathizing, a little bit more empathizing. Maybe that's the upside of this generation of streaming and twitching.
That's the hope.
That's the ideal part. Right, exactly, the hope.
Well, but I will say, like, I have friends who make 6 figures and they still pirate manga because they don't value the product. So I have one friend who makes 6 figures. The only manga he owns is Slam Dunk because he loved it that much that he really felt like he owned it. Everything else, not worth it to him.
Mm-hmm.
I have other friends that make various amounts of money, low and high, who just they just pirate everything. And even when there's a free option, even when there's a free legal option, and even when they've caught up with the title and they're reading it every week that it comes out, they still won't read the free legal option. They'd rather go to a pirate site because they can read 50 other things in one site. People will justify anything. People will justify their piracy however they wish. And we also Yes.
There's the other version of dollar bill yarn,
Hell,
right?
even
Well,
Exactly. Yep. No, I
hell,
was gonna say. I mean, it's just people convince themselves of anything when it comes to
yeah.
piracy, right?
I can speak for myself. Like I'm 12 weeks behind in One Piece. Because I fell behind on Weekly Shonen Jump reading because I was trying to look for a new job, and I really felt like I'd be wasting my time uh, if I wasn't trying to look for a new job. And uh, am I gonna pay for a subscription to catch up to those 9 chapters that I missed? No. I'm gonna like read those 9 chapters illegally, and then I'm gonna read the last 3 chapters legally, and then I'll just resume reading it legally from there. That's Everyone's gonna justify it one way or another.
so you
There's
just
always a
hope.
shade of gray to everything. We've had this conversation before.
Yes, we have. So you just hope. Okay, and then this leads to the final questions about where you think things are going in 5 years, where they think things are going in 5 years,
I mean,
and that's obviously it's looking into a crystal ball, so it's only as good as anybody else's prediction.
Yeah,
But
and
you just hope, and I know hope's not always a good plan. Hope that the sentiment you just talked about, Kevin,
let's not forget there
is in the
were
minority.
people there were numerous amounts of people who threw money at that anime tube Kickstarter, and those were people that probably wanted to stick it to the man too.
Well, that was part of the mentality. Although it's yeah, and maybe that's part of the whole crossroads that that fandom and the anime industry is face. It's less rebellious. It's not that rebellious. That feeling of rebellion isn't as much there anymore.
I think it's just
So
not as vocal.
sorry,
I think it's just not as vocal.
vocal.
Yeah, well, because obviously, of course, if you have more legal ways of consuming content, so long as you make it easy and accessible, people will
no,
go with
dude.
the option.
They'll
I,
never be. It'll never be easy enough. There'll never be a free enough way. Even if like it's hard to break that mentality, that habit of like of pirating stuff. I mean, there's nothing you can. Certain people are just going to pirate forever. Like, there's a
yeah,
certain percentage of consumers that will forever pirate, no matter how accessible something is.
yeah.
The
I have a
whole
friend. I have a
we
friend
can
who's
use
like that. He like other than maybe going to the odd movie in theaters, he fucking pirates everything. Like he does buy some video games too on Steam if they're cheap enough.
I say that about Yakuza, but okay.
But other than that, he fucking pirates everything.
You know, it's just. I know for me personally, when it comes to piracy, it's like I feel bad about it, you know? Like I feel morally wrong for doing it most of the time, right? But then there's times where I feel like, well, no, there's a giant corporation they can afford to
Like
they can afford my piracy.
my
Take one
one
for take it
download
on the
won't
chin.
really matter in the long scheme of things.
Well, yeah,
It's
it's
what some people
but maybe that depends on how big you are, De Vera or Chavez.
True, that's what makes it even worse. The Chavez's statement about like 6 months on the road, seeing your scanlations on or your output online like that. It's like, especially when you're working on the margin like that, that's like super heartbreaking.
Yeah, like I remember when they had to send a cease and desist letter to the one group that was scanlating the drops of God, and
Mm-hmm.
the scanlation group complied, and that was probably one example of a title that really did heed that cease and desist letter too, given how that title was one of the rare cases where they didn't license every volume, and that uh, each volume's release was tied to the success of the previous volume.
Mm.
That's kind of fucked up. Hold on, really?
Yeah,
That's
uh,
a fucked up deal, man.
it was. Well, the manga is very long, first of all, so
Feels like a gauntlet
it's
here.
so. But if I'm not mistaken, that was enforced by Shin Kibayashi, who's the
Okay.
the creator of Drops of God. He Well, that's his actual name. He uses a pseudonym for Drops of God.
Yeah, and I've heard he's had a bit of a reputation at times.
So then, yeah, so it was like each volume had to hit a certain sales number for them for Vertical to put out the next volume. But at the same time, you could argue as you know, as a person that sits on the sidelines that's doing armchair like debating, that also does hedge your risk a little bit as well, because then you don't have a Hajime no Ippo situation where you're like, oh shit, I gotta put out 130 volumes. Or in the case of Yen Press, oh shit, I have Yomushi Pedal and that's 70 volumes long. Or I think another example of like the limited, like there was a certain limit to what they can publish was Vinland Saga. Because I remember when Vinland Saga was licensed, Kodansha was telling fans, "Okay, we only have the rights to the first like 6 or 8 volumes. So if this doesn't do well, we're not putting out any more." And then eventually they did put out like the volume 9 to 10, it's like 7 to 8 volumes, and then they said, "Okay, we actually did do well enough to do 9 and 10, but if this doesn't do well, we're not going to put out any more." So they kept on like, I don't want to say they threatened the fans, but
hostage situation, bro. That's tough, man.
Yeah.
but but that was the reality of the situation with Vinland Saga, and the fans did come through because they are pretty much caught up with Japan now on Vinland Saga.
Okay. Well, so in 5 years.
I'd like
I
to
think
think so. Yeah, I'd like to think that more and more people would just support the artist and be more willing to
Well,
pay for
that's where it
stuff.
gets kind of interesting. Yeah, maybe in 5 years we talk more about the art. In this period, we talk more about the artists as opposed to their aside from their works. And Hamrick cited talking about Kentaro Miura. He got a lot of mention when he died, but it's sad that it took his death to get that mention because there was this understanding of what Berserk did and the influence it had not just in manga but in a lot of Western IP as well, right? And just left us with a quiz. Do you know the name of the creator of Attack on Titan? Which I thought was an interesting quiz. I forgot already. But 5 years, as I said, people's tastes are getting more eclectic. Once again, they're growing older, and it's not a bad thing. There's a manga for everything, is the line that Hamrick used.
but not everything is published. Let's not forget that, right?
Right, but maybe the demand's there. I mean, I spoke with, I put in my notes, curling question mark. Talking with Matt Alt, I asked him that exact question, and he put up a couple titles that aren't available in English, and joking around with a couple curling fans who I knew found out were also anime and manga fans. They are clamoring for that title. It's slam dunk or haiku to come, or eye shield. I say touch, but they're looking for that moment, right? They're looking for that title to come out in English. So, but Hamrick also hopes for a bigger focus on the personalities themselves. Although we can make this a debate for later on. And I put the note, yes and no, is the cult of personality out? I think that's probably a big overstate, but is the personalities of anime and manga gone out now? We can debate that another time. And if both of our listeners hear this, I'd like to hear their thoughts. I know James and Jeff will give a thought there later on. But moving down the list, when you see where's the business going in 5 years, Acker, Last boom bust 2009 doesn't really think that'll happen. We've had that. We explained that already because the fundamentally different circumstances now come from now to then. But they do foresee some sort of steadying of this flux. It's this they all most of them are by and large optimistic. They think this whole thing is here to stay. Once again, comes back down to the way the consumer base has grown in 10 years too, or matured in 10 years.
I mean, it's hopeful optimism, I guess. The idea that because the consumer base is maturing and will continue to mature, uh, and then new people will enter the fray, and more people will consume, and the numbers will increase, and so forth. I mean, yeah, it's we'll see, right? I mean, in 5 years'
Mm-hmm.
time, we'll see.
But Chavez, I know, is a little bit more pessimist, has a little bit more cautious with his, maybe even borderline pessimistic, because he knows that certain distributors, BNN, Diamond, they're having their issues, and they do have at least a double-digit percentage of the distribution, and that's still significant and could still hold some frustration for some people. But in terms of what is released, continuation of growth, and the continuation of what he called challenging works. But, but with Penguin Random House getting a better chance for outreach and availability in the hopes everyone will be helped. But Chavez's last thought was, I thought, the most interesting. Hopes for a trickle down for each publishers to be rewarded for trying different things, and hopes not just for recognition for original Japanese artists, but for those who work on the localizations,
Right,
on
the gatekeepers, right? I mean, you gotta give credit for the gatekeepers for letting in the golden
well,
gooses every so often.
yeah. Hammer hammered the point about respecting their responsibility as a gatekeeper in
Right.
that sense, but at least it's not just the artists work. You show some love to those who do the adaptations to make it available worldwide. Although we had that discussion of that, well, that isn't there always there, and it can get high profile when it's not there. Ask the translator of Kevin. Which title are we talking about again? We talked about this a couple months ago. The translator who took off his social media presence.
Oh, Caleb Cook.
Yeah,
Oh,
Caleb Cook.
for My Hero, right?
My Hero. Okay, My Hero Academia. Thank you. Name on the tip of my tongue. Sorry, this is my age showing.
I mean, from that perspective, I mean, I assume that in the next 5 years, that like the pay disparity for translators and so forth will probably be dealt with somewhat.
Oh, the word is somewhat. I don't think we like this. That's going to be an ongoing process, as far as I could tell.
I mean,
I just don't like, because this is the whole starving artist bit, right?
Right.
And that's been a concept, like that has stood the test of time.
I mean, and you'd hope that like at some point we'd like not have that be the case.
Mm-hmm. Well, hope is never the greatest plan, like I said. But the problem is, and maybe this is now going to the downside of the social medias. Those people make themselves known and they talk about their work, and they get trolled on pretty badly. Jealousy? Inaccuracy? Or somebody really being nitpicky on the inaccuracies?
No, I think it's just the growing pains of the internet. I feel like in 5 to 10 years time, those people that troll like that will no longer be on the internet.
Well, I mean, not in that way. I mean, it's just somebody who thinks that they're trying to be cute, I guess.
No, I think within 10 years time, the cuteness will have died down to the point where no one tries that shit anymore.
You're funny, Mo.
I know, right? I'm hilarious sometimes.
Well, I mean, once again to paraphrase or almost quote Conan O'Brien, right now, the internet has outpaced human evolution. Okay, let's go back to. I want to end this with Devera's thoughts because I thought his was once again very interesting, like you stated, Mo. He pointed to three predictions in what he thinks will happen in the next half decade. This will go on for a bit. He feels manga's popularity is here to stay. That's first. Second, thinks there will be something interesting to come down with digital because most comics, most digitally read comics out there right now, what's popular is the Korean web comic platforms. Biggest, and that's the biggest growth area. People put money out for the chapters there. Manga, in many ways, still has a way to go to match that popularity and accessibility, and he hopes something will happen in that time frame, 5 to 10 years. Digital manga platforms will develop and grow whether they like it or not. Remember when we talked about the anime tube story, one word that I kept saying was trust. The another phrase when we talked ICV2 during their manga week earlier this year was kicking and screaming. I mean, that's sort of the site. That's sort of where we are here. We have yet to see that, dare I say, Netflix digital-ish platform.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and obviously, if he knew exactly what form, or if anybody knew exactly what form that would take, we'd be on our way. If we knew that form of what we take, we wouldn't be doing this 2-bit podcast.
How funny would it be that in 5 years' time, the Netflix of manga is like a GameStop owned digital platform or something?
Well, they've had to be creative, but obviously there has to be a lot of buy-in. Anime Tube, I guess, were thinking they could do something, but they lacked the trust and probably burned all the bridges for that access.
They lack business sense too.
Yeah. I mean, you go on the business end. I just go on the plain, well, make yourself look good to the people you need to look good to. Not just a trade organization who probably doesn't have that access. They looked good to the wrong people, or at least the people who couldn't help them. Third point by Devera, and this pretty much ends it off the panel. Most people consuming manga will be doing so by legitimate means, book or digital. I guess comes back down to point number 2. Consumers would develop a conscience to support the artists and those who work in the industry. His wish, of course, see more manga come out here. A point where most titles will be available legitimately, and people having a cornucopia of various options, or overwhelmed, as I think was the word I used.
Bold word.
Rose colored glasses.
Definitely.
A little. A little bit.
Maybe think big.
Well, because you think about it this way, there's so much manga in Japan. So it really depends on, by most titles, what does he mean by that? Most titles licensed in North America? Or most manga period? I assume he doesn't mean most manga period, because that's just not realistic.
I'm guessing North American, but even then, I mean, this is all based on the
You think it's the emotion of this last 18 months?
Exactly. I mean, this pandemic's not going to last forever, guys. You know, fingers crossed. At some point,
look at those vaccination rates, dude.
Oh God.
That's another story altogether. We shouldn't get too far away from that, but we'll save that for episode 49.
Because you really do need 1 or 2 dominant platforms where you have manga titles from multiple publishers for people to really consider going legal. Plus, you'd have to figure out a way to monetize the people like some of my friends who don't fucking pay or don't read legally when the option exists, even when it's free.
You just got to hope that segment gets squeezed out in some form, as in their numbers dwindle.
Yes, that's what
or
happens
or,
with anime.
or the legal numbers increase enough to mitigate the non-legal numbers.
Yeah,
Because that's what
the
happened with
other version
anime,
of it.
right? Eventually, you had enough platforms that had free legal anime to watch or cheap legal anime to watch in a subscription format that it's actually more hassle to pirate.
Mm-hmm.
But with manga, that's there's just so much more manga that's out versus anime because there's thousands of manga titles that exist. So there's no way that all of that's going to be legal. Maybe the bulk of the new stuff will after a certain point. That's
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Well,
Who knows?
pair that up with the other hopes, the empathy for the artists, and the hope the companies are paying attention to what's pirated, because those might be opportunities.
And I actually, this is a bit of an aside. I actually didn't feel like I fleshed out one of the points I made earlier about like digital manga, where Kodansha. So pretty much with Kodansha stuff, it's like, okay, if we get enough digital sales, then we may consider making those making this digital exclusive title in print. That was what I took an issue with, Mike, because I'm not the person who will want to double dip because I prefer reading my digital manga through a subscription service. I'm not going to
Not through
pay $8 for a digital manga volume when I know I could pay $2 more and have or $3 more or whatever, and then have a physical version that I could potentially get rid of and get some of my money back if I don't want it anymore, or if I really needed to get some money for whatever reason in my life. Granted, I know sales happen, and I know Kodansha did do a sale recently where they made some volume ones free, and they made some volume 2 and 3s very cheap, like $1 or $2. So it's not as if they aren't
maybe that's the
trying.
pricing model. Yeah, well, you made me reflect on something else that happened 10 years ago: the all those ebook controversies and price controversies.
Did you get your check from? I think Google did it, and Amazon had their
No,
shit.
I have no clue how to do that. But and
What?
you did hit an interesting point. 10 years on, the ebooks really, like, they're cool, but maybe they're not to the level that we thought they would be, because the pricing is still, well, we thought that that it could make a book more affordable. All it just really ended up, I think, the formula that ended up happening instead was, well, the physical went up and the ebook was at the level where the physical once was, or at least something in between. But it's
It's
certainly, it just, the price is never really, the price on an ebook version never really came down.
Which is,
So,
it's fine. Like, whatever. I understand why. More margin, I imagine. More profit
mhm.
margin.
But something happened to it, but the model
But
hasn't worked out the way many consumers hoped.
yeah, I'm not paying like almost full price for a digital book when it's not something that I can flip through. Well, not that I guess you can technically flip through the tablet, but you know what I mean.
I know, just run your fingers through it, run your
Yeah,
thumb across the edge of the pages, right?
I'm surprised more places don't do the Audible type subscription model plus digital sales. Like I feel like that's a decent model, where you pay that monthly subscription to get access to a whole bunch of stuff, or you can buy stuff individually. But I mean, it's at some point someone has to come up with like a universal, not universal, but like a really decent like pricing structure, right?
Well, I'm glad. It's interesting that you brought up the audiobook part of it. So and that's a food for thought, I guess, because I never really thought of it, to be honest. I'm sure somebody else is looking at it, but we'll see.
Yeah, but
Okay.
basically, I don't want to double dip. That's the way I
Okay,
put
and
it. I don't want to
I get it.
have to buy a digital copy just so that I can like hope that I might get a physical version down the road.
Well, guess what? Yeah, and that all said for me well, I double dipped on a Kickstarter when it came to Kimagure Orange Road. Got a digital, got the physicals at the same time.
I mean, the double dipping, I feel like is only for certain titles that you truly care about, right? Like,
Yeah, and that was the mitigating
Well,
circumstance,
Mike,
and you
in
guys
your
know.
case, you got them both. Well, not well. It was supposed to be both at the same time, but you were already buying both together. That's different than, oh, we're holding the physical version hostage because we don't know if it'll do well. Okay, that's not fair to say holding it hostage, but basically it's like because we don't know how well it'll do, like we can't put it physically right now because we can only put out so many books, which is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, as I said, ongoing discussion. Any final thought you want to bring up, or should we just let the end the chat and then let others see what they think and see what others ultimately think about it, whether it's through whatever comments come up or what James and Jeff ultimately say.
I really need to buy Boys Run the Ride. I've been meaning to pick that up for a little bit now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Boys Run the Ride. That seems to be interesting.
That's been on my radar for quite a while, actually, even before its release.
Mm-hmm. Mo?
no, I'm good. Thanks.
Well, I mean, you brought up some interesting thoughts, especially at the end there.
I mean, we'll see how it goes, right? I mean, we could all be optimistic.
No,
Hopefully,
we're trying to be anyway. We're trying to be. It's just what stuck out. And this is something we're just talking about the stuff that stuck out in a panel that's available now available on YouTube. So we're going to put the link up again for that, although we did put it up for the last episode. And in many respects, a lot of what was stated here, we talked about in some form as it relates to other segments of our fandom. So essentially, we're funneling it all into manga. All the stuff we've talked about in the pandemic series, how that relates to the manga side. And this was an interesting panel, and reheightens some of the awareness that I lost personally on the manga side. I don't know how much personally I'll end up consuming in the near future. Maybe I'll look at the present. I keep saying I'll look at the present digital options, and we'll see. I guess the danger I'm going to see is if we make that attempted Netflix move. Just keep in mind where the streaming movie services are right now. There's a lot of options, and the danger right now is, well, the manga side could have even more of those, and that's, I guess, the real fear. So you're right on the funneling, and a service that could unite, that could be able to draw from more than a few publishers at a time.
yeah, it's like one for all or all for one, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's either we survive together or we die alone.
One of those things. So, as I said, these are interesting predictions and crystal balls, but but in the end, no one really knows what's going to happen. And if we did, they'd be rich. But in the end, it's up to them and it's up to the consumers, us as fans.
So please, people, go buy stuff. We need you to buy more stuff,
or at least give consideration. You just, as I said, you're hearing our thoughts on a panel that happened. So watch the panel
and
if you took any interest in what we have just talked about over the last hour 25 minutes. Sorry, Mo. Last thing.
no, and then hit up your local shops and buy all the manga you can buy.
Yeah, Kevin. One last thought.
Uh, I'm happy that manga is doing as well as it is now, and it really does seem like more mainstream than in the past, even in comparison to the initial boom time during Tokyo Pop's heyday, because I see it in person. Like I go to Chapters or Indigo, and I go to independent bookshops, and I see people like going through the manga shelves talking about, yeah, like, damn, I can't find that new volume of JoJo, or like, yeah, I've read, oh yeah, like, hey, I read this, it was really good, you can check it out. Uh, just seeing more and more people like, browsing the shelves and buying stuff in person really does show that manga's been doing quite well, and I'm happy for it.
Still a lot to consider, though.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait for the next. Can't wait for the next Indigo sale, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully that's going to happen at the end of this month. Who knows,
Yeah.
though?
By the way, if you're still making that, or if you're still making that birthday order with Indigo, I still would like to help your help in with the latest Haruhi novel,
We'll see
because
how
I
it
forgot
goes.
about that in my order. Huh?
We'll see how it goes.
Okay. But there's our thoughts, for what it's worth, as we in this little Space Eater chat. So, what's your contribution to the chat? Let us know. AnimeRoundtable@gmail.com is our email address. You can hit us up on the socials at Anime Roundtable, Twitter and Instagram, and follow us there, and you'll hear from us. And if you are hearing this for the first time and any of this got your attention, you probably know our web address, animeroundtable.com. You can listen to past episodes there and show notes for all the other episodes, not as if you really need notes for this one. In any event, that's all we got for this little almost 90-minute Space Heater chat. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you in episode 49 either next week or the week after.